I never thought the woman I gave up everything for would be the one to stab me in the back. For 22 years, Lena was my world. My partner. My reason for working late shifts and skipping vacations. I supported her through business school, held down the house when she was promoted, and watched her rise through the corporate ranks with nothing but pride. Until the night I saw her boss's hand on her lower back. Until I watched her giggle, press into him like a schoolgirl, and lean in for a kiss she thought no one could see. That was the night I realized my wife wasn't mine anymore. And when I confronted her, when I calmly asked why she would betray me like that, she didn't apologize. She didn't even blink. She said, "If you try to divorce me, I will ruin you." Those words? I'll never forget them. She looked me dead in the eyes like she was daring me to fight back. But she didn't know who I really was. She didn't know I had spent the last year watching everything fall apart while quietly preparing for this very moment. She thought she held all the power. She thought her affair was her ticket to the top. What she didn't expect was the truth I uncovered. The secret that not only destroyed her promotion but ended her career. This isn't a story about a man getting cheated on. This is a story about what happens when you betray the wrong man, and he doesn't just walk away. He walks away with everything. Thank you for watching this far. If this story hit you somewhere deep, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel with someone who needs to hear that loyalty isn't weakness, it's power when given to the right person. I was 52 when the company I'd given nearly 2 decades to called me into a beige-walled conference room and handed me a severance check. Just like that, I was no longer Scott Marshall, accounting manager. I was just another laid-off middle-aged man in a collapsing economy. It wasn't personal, they said. Corporate restructuring. A merger. The usual buzzwords meant to dull the sting of being discarded. I nodded, shook hands, and walked out without saying much. Truthfully, I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of grinding out long weeks while the upper brass made decisions from glass offices, and tired of pretending I still loved spreadsheets more than my family. I figured maybe this was a sign. Maybe I could finally rest, take a breath, be present. Lena, my wife of 22 years, had just started her MBA a few months earlier, paid for by her employer, a major insurance firm based in Charlotte. She was thriving, her energy electric, and I admired that. We agreed that while she dove headfirst into her program, I'd take care of everything at home. It made sense. Our 3 kids were off to college. The house needed work. I told myself this was temporary, just a season. But if I'm honest, part of me welcomed the change. I liked the idea of being the one who made dinner, fixed the leaky sink, and actually lived inside our home instead of just sleeping in it. Lena supported the idea too, or at least, she said she did. She smiled when I offered to take over the household so she could focus. She even kissed me on the cheek and called me her rock. At the time, I believed her. I believed a lot of things. I had no idea how fast all of it would unravel. Lena was 49 when she enrolled in the executive MBA program her company offered, and from the moment she stepped into that world of late-night Zoom classes, weekend seminars, and power suits, something in her shifted. She had always been sharp, disciplined, ambitious, but now there was a new fire in her. She started talking differently, walking with a quicker pace, quoting case studies and management gurus over dinner while I listened and nodded, genuinely proud of her. I made sure she had everything she needed. I took over the bills, grocery runs, and appointments. I replaced the rotten deck boards, remodeled the guest bathroom, and reorganized the garage she hadn't touched in years. I kept the fridge stocked with her favorite snacks for study nights and left little notes of encouragement in her laptop bag before she left for class. I became the quiet engine behind her success, the one who kept the house running so she could chase her goals without looking back. The first few months felt like teamwork. She'd send me messages from campus about how tough her classes were, how competitive the students were, how her professors expected more from her than she anticipated. I would write back something supportive, sometimes funny, to keep her grounded. We still had wine on Saturdays and watched old movies in bed. But over time, those messages got shorter. Then they stopped altogether. She'd come home late and distracted, and when I asked how things were going, she'd say, "Fine," with a clipped tone that shut the conversation down before it started. She stopped laughing at my dumb jokes. She stopped noticing the little things. At first, I blamed the stress. I told myself she was overwhelmed, that I just needed to hold steady a little longer. But the truth was, Lena wasn't just building a career, she was building a life I was no longer part of. And by the time I realized how far gone she was, I was already standing outside a locked door, wondering when exactly I became invisible to the woman I thought I knew better than anyone. The early signs were subtle, easy to dismiss if you weren't paying attention, or if, like me, you didn't want to believe what they really meant. Lena started pulling away in ways that didn't look like betrayal at first, more like exhaustion or distraction. She was always too busy. Too busy to talk about her day, too busy to sit down for dinner, too busy to look me in the eye for more than a passing second. Her phone never left her hand anymore, always lighting up with messages she never shared and calls she took behind closed doors. I'd hear her laugh in the kitchen, that light, flirtatious laugh she used to reserve just for me, and when I'd walk in, she'd quickly end the call with a flat "I'll talk to you later." She didn't offer an explanation, and I didn't press. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure husband paranoid about every little thing. So I swallowed it. I told myself she was stressed. That she just needed space. But space soon became distance. Then absence. Her company started inviting us to networking events and galas, the kind with name tags and champagne and rooftop views. At the first few, she clung to my arm, beaming as she introduced me as her partner in crime, the man who held it all together. But that changed too. Eventually, she'd vanish into the crowd the second we arrived, leaving me nursing a drink by the bar or stuck in polite small talk with some CFO's wife while Lena laughed a little too loudly across the room with people I didn't know. I became background noise, just another +1 who no longer belonged in her new world. The final blow came one night when we got home late, and I reached for her. She pulled away like my touch was foreign. "I'm exhausted," she said, rolling to her side. No kiss. No warmth. Just cold silence. That was the first night I slept on the far edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how love disappears without either of you noticing until it's already gone. Our kids were the first to say something out loud. All three of them, Jordan, Claire, and Mason, had left for college, but they still came home for long weekends, birthdays, and holidays. It didn't take long before they started exchanging looks at the dinner table, asking quiet questions when Lena stepped away. "Dad, is everything okay between you and Mom?" Claire was the first to ask, her voice low but worried. I smiled, that fake kind of smile you give when you're trying to keep something from unraveling. "She's just really focused on work right now," I said. "The MBA program's intense. She's under a lot of pressure." I think I believed that when I said it, or maybe I just needed to. I wasn't ready to admit to my own kids that something was broken in their parents' marriage. So I kept the facade up. I kept making Sunday breakfast. Kept pretending the silence in our bedroom wasn't deafening. But they saw it. They saw how she never looked at me anymore. How she barely spoke unless it was about meetings, promotions, or who she was having lunch with from the board. Jordan called me one night after he got back to campus. He didn't ask questions this time. He just said, "Whatever's going on, Dad, you don't deserve to feel alone." I told him I was fine. That everything would settle once Lena finished her program. I didn't know then that the program wasn't the problem, it was just the excuse. Even our friends noticed. At a neighborhood cookout, one of our oldest friends, Mark, pulled me aside with a half smile and said, "So, Lena's really into all this executive mingling stuff, huh?" I laughed it off. "She's networking. It's good for her career." He looked at me a beat longer than he should have. "Yeah. Just don't get lost in the shuffle, all right?" I didn't know how to tell him I already had. And when I asked Lena about all the time she was spending out, every dinner, every cocktail party, every overnight trip, she barely blinked. It's called networking, Scott, she snapped. This is what it takes to win. You wouldn't understand. And maybe she was right. I didn't understand. Not then. But I was about to. When Lena invited me to join her on a corporate retreat in Miami, I saw it as a chance to reconnect, maybe even reset. The trip was hosted by her company, all expenses paid at a beachfront resort that looked like something out of a magazine. She called it a strategic leadership summit, but promised we'd have some time to relax. I packed a few polo shirts and lightweight slacks, told myself maybe things were finally shifting back toward us. For the first hour, it even felt that way. The flight was easy, the hotel was beautiful, and Lena smiled the way she used to when we checked into the suite. But by that evening, she had already slipped into her heels and corporate face. Just a few networking sessions, she said, brushing her lipstick on as I sat on the edge of the bed. Cocktails with the board. I shouldn't be long. I offered to come with her. She paused, then smiled without warmth. It's all execs, Scott. +1s or more for the dinner gala tomorrow. So I waited. I watched some cable TV, scrolled through photos of the kids on my phone, then wandered down to the hotel's tiki bar to kill time. After my second gin and tonic, I noticed a group of people gathering on the upper terrace, just above the pool. The glass balcony reflected soft lights, the kind meant to make money and ambition look romantic. I spotted Lena immediately, elegant, poised, smiling in that polished way she reserved for company events. She wasn't alone. Standing next to her was a tall man in his mid-50s, dressed like someone who always knew he was the most important person in the room. He had his hand resting casually on the small of her back. She leaned into him. He said something close to her ear. She giggled. Then she kissed his cheek, slow, familiar. I stared up from the pool deck like someone watching his house burn from the lawn, not sure when the fire started. I had no idea who he was yet. But I already knew what he meant. And I knew Lena was gone. Not physically. But emotionally, maybe forever. It was just past 1:20 a.m. when the suite door creaked open. I'd left a lamp on near the minibar, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I needed her to see me awake. I wanted her to know I was paying attention now. Lena stepped in barefoot, heels dangling from her fingers, her silk shawl draped over one shoulder, hair slightly mussed in a way that didn't look like wind or weather. Her lipstick was gone, her earrings missing. She froze for a second when she saw me sitting upright on the edge of the bed. Then she sighed, like I was an inconvenience she had forgotten she had to deal with. "You're still up?" she asked, her voice tired and thinly veiled with annoyance. "It's late," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Where were you?" She blinked slowly, as if the question bored her. "Networking. Talking with Victor. It's all part of the game, Scott. You know how these things work." "No," I said. "I actually don't know how it works when a married woman kisses her boss under string lights at midnight." That got her attention. Her face hardened, jaw tightening just enough for me to notice. "You were spying on me?" "I was sitting by the pool, drinking the gin you told me to charge to the room," I snapped. "I didn't go looking for anything. I just looked up, and there you were." She dropped her shoes with a soft thud and crossed her arms, like I was the one who had crossed a line. "This isn't what you think it is." "Then help me understand," I said, standing now. "Explain why the man with his hand on your back, who you kissed, was more important than your husband waiting here all night." "You're being dramatic," she muttered. "Victor's wife is out of the country. We were discussing company strategy and the upcoming expansion. He invited me to talk in his suite. It wasn't anything serious. So why didn't you tell me that before?" She shrugged, then rolled her eyes. "Because I knew you'd react like this." And there it was. Not denial. Not remorse. Just annoyance. Like I was the one who had betrayed her with my questions. Like the truth didn't matter unless it served her goals. I stood there, staring at a woman I no longer recognized, and all I wanted was for her to admit it. To show some trace of guilt or even hesitation. But instead, She turned her back on me, walked toward the bathroom, and started undoing the buttons on her blouse like this was just another night. I didn't move. I couldn't. "Lena," I said, my voice lower now, steady but sharp. "Are you cheating on me?" She didn't stop undressing. She didn't even flinch. "Don't be ridiculous," she said, tossing her blouse into the laundry bag like we were on a vacation and not standing in the middle of our dying marriage. "Then tell me the truth," I said. "Have you been with him?" She turned around, her expression flat, almost bored. "Does it matter?" I felt the floor shift beneath me. "It matters to me." She sighed, stepping closer. "Scott, look at your life. You've been unemployed for how long now? 2 years? You're home all day doing chores like a retired man. I'm the one bringing in the money. I'm the one making moves. This is just business." My chest tightened. "So I'm just the help now? Is that what I am to you?" She smiled then, not kindly, but with that smug, condescending curl of her lip I'd seen her use in meetings with interns she thought were beneath her. "You'd be nothing without me. Let's not pretend otherwise." The words hit like a punch I hadn't seen coming. "You don't mean that," I said, even though I knew she absolutely did. "Try leaving," she said, stepping so close I could smell the perfume she only wore to impress someone else. "Go ahead. File for divorce. I'll ruin you. You have no job, no assets in your name, no legal claim to the house. You'll be out on the street. I've worked my ass off to get where I am, and I'm not about to let you sabotage it with your midlife crisis morality." I wanted to yell, to break something, to wake up from the nightmare she had turned into our reality. But I didn't. I just stood there, numb, finally understanding that the woman in front of me wasn't confused or lost. She was calculated. And she was daring me to fight her. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even argue. Something inside me just shut off. Not like a switch, but like a slow, deliberate turn of a valve that closed off everything: grief, anger, love. I looked at Lena as she turned back toward the bathroom, already reaching for her toothbrush, already acting like the conversation was over, and I felt nothing. Not hatred. Not heartbreak. Just silence. The kind of silence you only feel when you've been bleeding for so long that the pain finally fades into numbness. That's when I knew she was gone. Not physically, she'd be back in bed beside me in 30 minutes, pretending this day was like any other. But the woman I'd built a life with, the one I once believed in more than anything, didn't exist anymore. She had been replaced by someone who saw people as tools and love as leverage. And in that moment, something in me shifted. The pleading husband vanished. The man trying to fix what was broken disappeared. What remained was a version of me she hadn't accounted for. A man who knew how to stay quiet, observe, prepare. A man who didn't raise his voice, but never forgot being threatened. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the dark ocean. It was calm, beautiful, unbothered by the storm unraveling behind me. And as I stared into it, I began to plan. Not revenge. Not destruction. Just clarity. I would find out exactly how far she'd gone. I would understand every hidden account, every lie, every piece of ground she thought she controlled. I would stop being a bystander in my own life. No more guessing. No more asking for honesty she refused to give. If she wanted war disguised as business, I'd give her something she never saw coming: a man who stopped hoping and started thinking. I turned off the lamp, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling, not blinking. I wasn't her problem yet. But soon, she'd remember exactly who I was before I became her shadow. And this time, I wouldn't be fading. I'd be stepping forward. Quietly. Precisely. Completely in control. Back home, the silence between us became a living thing, stretching across rooms and echoing down hallways. Lena barely spoke to me after the retreat, and I didn't push. I was already several steps ahead. She thought I would sulk, stew, maybe spiral. But I was too busy making calls. The first one was to Ashley Hawk, a name I remembered from a former coworker who had gone through a nasty divorce. She had a reputation, brilliant, relentless, known for tearing apart cheating husbands and protecting wives who'd given everything. But I wasn't calling for my wife's protection. I was calling because I knew that if anyone could handle the firestorm Lena would bring, it was her. Ashley's assistant answered with professional crispness and scheduled me in for a consultation within 3 days. I showed up early, wearing the same blazer I hadn't dusted off since my last interview years ago, trying to look less like the unemployed house husband Lena claimed I had become. When Ashley stepped into the lobby, she didn't look like the courtroom bulldog I'd expected. Petite, mid-40s, sharp brown eyes that didn't miss a thing. "Mr. Marshall," she said, extending her hand with a firm grip, "come on back." I sat across from her in an office lined with degrees and heavy law books, and I told her everything. I started with the layoff, the housework, Lena's rise, the affair, the threats. Her pen stopped moving about halfway through. She looked up, clearly intrigued. "Let me get this straight," she said. "You were the primary homemaker for the last 2 years while your wife climbed the executive ladder. She had an affair with her boss and told you she'd ruin you if you tried to leave?" I nodded. "That's correct." Ashley leaned back, assessing me with a mix of curiosity and growing fire. "Well, Mr. Marshall, I usually represent women. Stay-at-home moms, mostly. But this might be the first time I've had a stay-at-home husband walk through my door with this story. And I'll tell you something, you've got a hell of a case." And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't powerless. I had someone in my corner who knew how to fight. And Lena? She had no idea the battle had already begun. Ashley didn't waste time. By the end of our first meeting, she handed me a list of immediate action items and gave me the contact information for Jack Masters, a private investigator she'd worked with for years. "Discreet, experienced, and thorough," she said. "He's the kind of guy who'll get you facts, not drama." I called him that afternoon, and by the next morning, Jack was parked in a black SUV 2 houses down from mine, sipping coffee and watching through a long lens while we talked over the phone. He asked for names, patterns, email addresses, travel dates, everything I could remember. The second part of the plan came later that evening. While Lena was out at another work dinner, Jack and 2 tech guys arrived in an unmarked van and quietly installed 4 hidden cameras inside the house, one in the kitchen, one near the front hallway, one in the living room, and another in the office where she kept her personal laptop. "Don't worry," Jack said, handing me a secured link to view live feeds. "These aren't for peeking, they're for proof. If she tries to cover her tracks, you'll know." He gave me one last piece of advice before leaving. "Start protecting your assets, man. Quietly. Freeze anything joint, and get anything personal into a separate account. Don't make a move too soon, but don't wait until she makes the first one." That night, I transferred our small household checking balance into a new account with only my name on it. I left exactly $1 in the old one. Lena didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care. She was too busy texting with someone under the table during dinner, smirking to herself like a teenager caught up in a secret. I just smiled and cleared the dishes like nothing had changed. But it had. Everything had. The man she thought she'd broken? He was watching, planning, documenting. She was still playing the game, but now, I wasn't a pawn, I was the one flipping the board. And when the time came, I'd make sure every move she made led her exactly where she deserved to end up. The next few weeks passed in quiet, calculated silence. Lena carried on with her charade, dressing sharper than ever, leaving earlier, coming home later. She had no idea that every word, every call she made in the house was being recorded. Jack checked in with updates every few days, and each time, his voice grew more serious. "Scott," he said one afternoon over the phone, "this goes deeper than just Victor." My stomach turned. I already suspected it, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch to the ribs. Jack continued, "We've tracked a series of hotel stays, under her name, with another executive. Mark Hendricks, head of HR at her firm. They've been meeting every few weeks since last year, including during her off-site trainings. I didn't respond right away. My hands were clenched so tight I could feel the pulse in my palms. Jack let the silence hang before he added, "There's more. I had one of my financial guys dig through her tax filings and we found discrepancies. She's been converting portions of her bonuses into executive stock options, then diverting those to a separate brokerage account offshore. The account's in her name only. She's been building her own golden parachute, probably planning to ditch you once she hit a high enough title." I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching Lena's coat still hanging on the hook by the door, the same coat she wore to every boardroom event and late-night meeting. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore, it was strategic. Planned. Executed. She wasn't just falling out of love. She was engineering an exit while erasing me from the narrative. "You still with me, Scott?" Jack asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice low. "I'm with you." But inside, everything was shifting. I no longer felt like the heartbroken husband. I wasn't wounded, I was wide awake. She had turned our marriage into a chessboard, thinking I was the king she could sacrifice. But she forgot that pawns make it to the other side too. And when they do, they become queens. That night, as she laughed on the phone in the living room and called me babe in passing just to keep the peace, I looked at her and realized she wasn't just cheating on me. She was building an empire, and assuming I'd never find the blueprint. She had no idea I'd already started tearing it down from underneath her. By the time Lena came home from her latest conference in Chicago, I had everything I needed: records of her affairs, screenshots of her offshore accounts, timestamps from hotel bookings, and hours of footage that painted the truth in sharp, undeniable detail. But she walked through the door like she was returning from a yoga retreat, not a weekend wrapped around someone else's promises. She tossed her suitcase down by the entryway, kicked off her heels, and smiled like we were still playing house. "Hey, babe," she said, breezing past me into the kitchen. "How was your weekend?" I was sitting at the dining table, pretending to browse through emails, the camera feed still open in a small window on my laptop, capturing every careless move she made. "Quiet," I said flatly. "Productive." She poured herself a glass of wine, took a sip, then turned toward me, the smile lingering with just a hint of something else, something calculated. "I was thinking," she began, setting the glass down and walking slowly toward me, "maybe we should take a weekend for ourselves. Get away. You and me. Somewhere quiet." I looked up, expression unreadable. "Now you want to get away?" "Scott," she said, lowering her voice as she slid behind me and put her hands on my shoulders. "I know I've been distant. It's just the stress. The board is circling, there's a chance at COO soon. I've had to keep up appearances. But you and me, we're solid, right?" Her fingers trailed lightly along my collarbone. I gently took her hand and removed it. "We were," I said. "A long time ago." Her face froze for half a second before recovering. "Don't be dramatic. You're just tired." "No," I said, standing up, meeting her eyes with the kind of cold focus that she didn't expect from the man she thought she could manipulate. "I'm done." She blinked. Once. Twice. Then scoffed, a nervous laugh escaping like she was still trying to control the conversation. "Don't be ridiculous. We're just going through a rough patch." "No, Lena. You're going through it. I've already moved past it." She had no idea that the next move was already in motion, and the only one playing catch-up now was her. After she went upstairs, probably to unpack her lies and brush her teeth with the same ease she used to sell boardroom pitches, I stayed at the dining table, motionless. The house was quiet, save for the soft creak of the floorboards overhead. But inside me, everything was loud. Not chaotic, not confused, just full. Full of memories that rose like smoke from a house long burned down. I thought about our wedding day, how beautiful she looked in that simple lace dress, standing barefoot on the dock behind her parents' lake house, laughing because my tie was crooked and I couldn't stop shaking. I remembered the way she used to look at me then, not with calculation, Not with performance, but with something real. Something that made me feel like I'd found home in a person. I thought about the nights we rocked our newborns to sleep in that tiny rental, when money was tight and time was tighter, but we never felt poor. We had burned dinners, midnight feedings, and mismatched furniture, but we had each other. And that had been enough. I thought about building our first home together, laying the tile in the kitchen by hand, arguing over paint colors, then making up with pizza on the floor and our favorite record playing low in the background. I gave her everything I had back then. Time. Energy. Faith. I took pride in providing, and when I lost my job, I took even more pride in supporting her. I didn't see it as sacrifice, I saw it as love. Commitment. Partnership. But love doesn't leave lipstick stains that don't belong to you. Love doesn't file stock options into secret portfolios or check into hotels under fake names. And love sure as hell doesn't look you in the eyes and say, "You'd be nothing without me." At some point, the grief turned to rage. But even that burned out. What remained wasn't fire, it was ash. Cold. Weightless. Numb. And in that numbness, I found clarity. This wasn't a woman who lost her way. This was a woman who walked it, willingly, repeatedly, and without shame. She had replaced love with ambition, trust with leverage, and me with convenience. I wasn't the victim in her story. I was just the placeholder she'd kept around until something better, or richer, came along. But placeholders don't stay silent forever. Some of them wake up. Some of them remember who they were before the silence. And some, like me, start writing their own ending. Not for revenge. But for closure. For peace. For something honest. Something I hadn't had in years. The days that followed moved with a strange calm. Lena still came and went like everything was normal, still dressed like a rising executive, still carried herself like a woman who believed the world owed her a seat at the top. She had no idea the ground beneath her was already crumbling. Jack had called me the night before her big promotion vote. His tone was different, steady, but with the faintest trace of satisfaction. "You might want to keep an eye on your inbox tomorrow," he said. "Something interesting is about to hit the boardroom." I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. The footage, the files, the offshore statements, we had more than enough. But what Jack had now was something different. Something surgical. A copy of an email, buried in the company server, recovered through channels I didn't want to know, written from Lena to Victor. It was short. Blunt. And devastating. "Sleeping with you is just strategy. You know that. I needed the leverage. I'll get the COO seat either way, but I expect your vote. This isn't personal, it's corporate." There was no warmth in her words. No regret. Just calculation. Confidence. Arrogance. Jack didn't send it to me. He didn't send it to Ashley. He sent it directly, and anonymously, to the inboxes of the full board of directors at 7:58 a.m. 2 minutes before the meeting started. While Lena was probably adjusting her blazer in a mirrored elevator and rehearsing her acceptance speech in her head, the people deciding her future were reading her confession on company time. She had no clue. No instinct that her entire image, polished, professional, poised, was shattering behind the scenes. At 9:43 a.m., I got the first text from Jack. "It's done." They're livid. By noon, the promotion vote had been pulled. By 1:15, Victor was asked to resign. And by 2 o'clock, Lena's badge access was revoked, and she was escorted out of the building without so much as a final email. She called me at 2:27. I didn't answer. She texted, "Call me. Something's wrong." But nothing was wrong. Everything was finally, perfectly right. By the next morning, the company's internal landscape had completely shifted. What was supposed to be Lena's coronation had turned into a reckoning. Word spread quickly, first through hushed conversations between board members, then across executive floors like wildfire. Her bid for COO wasn't just rejected, it was buried, without vote, without ceremony, without acknowledgement. The email had detonated any chance of discussion. And with Victor's name attached, the fallout expanded like a crater. The man who had once ruled the boardroom with charm and quiet dominance suddenly found himself boxed in by scandal. He was asked to resign for the integrity of the company, though everyone knew what that really meant. But the twist no one saw coming, the one Lena certainly hadn't accounted for, was that Victor's wife, Margot Davis, wasn't just watching this unfold. She was already preparing to step in. As the daughter of the company's founder and majority shareholder, Margot had always remained in the background, content to let her husband carry the title. But once she confirmed the affair, once she saw the email with her own eyes, she wasted no time. Within hours of Victor's exit, the board announced Margot as the interim COO. By end of week, the interim was dropped. She took the title, the office, the power. And she wasted no time making her first major personnel decision. Lena was called into HR under the guise of a standard compliance review. No fanfare. No drama. Just a cold, corporate exit. Security walked her down from the executive floor. Her access cards were disabled before the elevator reached the lobby. There were no farewell speeches. No goodbye cake. Just stunned silence as employees watched a woman once destined for the top disappear into the revolving glass doors like yesterday's news. Back at home, the house felt heavier. I didn't need to say a word. She stormed in that evening red-faced, shaken, and hollow. Her heels clicked with uncertainty this time, not power. She threw her purse on the counter and turned to face me, as if expecting me to already know. And I did. Every single detail. But I let her tell it anyway. Watching her scramble to rewrite the story while knowing I had written the ending was a justice I never thought I'd live to see. She didn't even make it through the door before the cracks started to show. I heard the car pull up, her engine idling longer than usual in the driveway, like she was trying to work up the courage to walk in. When the front door finally creaked open, Lena stood there looking nothing like the woman who used to float into this house with polished confidence and a phone glued to her ear. Her blouse was wrinkled, hair pulled into a messy knot, no makeup, eyes rimmed with red. Her hands trembled as she set her keys on the console table, like even that simple act took effort. "Scott," she said, voice soft, almost hoarse. I didn't respond. I was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, watching her, not with anger, but with the cool detachment you give someone who's already made their choices. She took a few hesitant steps forward, then stopped. I messed up," she whispered. I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. She blinked fast, tears beginning to form. "I know you're angry. I know I've done things I can't undo. But please, can we talk?" "We're talking," I said. "Say what you came to say." Her shoulders dropped, her voice cracking. "They fired me. Margot, she didn't even look me in the eye. She just had security walk me out like I was nothing." I said nothing. Just waited. She sniffed, tried to compose herself, then looked up at me with that expression, part desperation, part charm, she'd once used to get out of parking tickets or boardroom slip-ups. "Please, Scott. I want to come home. I want to fix this. I made a mistake, several mistakes. But I can change. I will change." I shook my head slowly, standing now, facing her squarely. "Lena, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. Over and over. And now that it blew up in your face, you want to crawl back like nothing happened." She stepped forward, voice rising. "I need you." "No," I said, stepping back. "You need a safe place to land. But you lost that the night you looked me in the eyes and said I was nothing." Her tears came freely then, but they didn't move me. Not anymore. That version of me, the one who would have begged for her to stay, was gone. She followed me to the hallway, barefoot and stumbling through her own regret, but I didn't stop. I grabbed my jacket from the coat rack like I had somewhere to be, even though I didn't. I just needed space, space between her words and my peace. "Scott, please," she said again, her voice trembling. "I know I've been terrible. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But we built a life together. Doesn't that mean something?" I turned to her slowly, meeting her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small in her presence. I didn't feel broken. I felt certain. "It did mean something, Lena," I said calmly. "It meant everything. Until it didn't. Until you turned it into a transaction. Until you decided that ambition mattered more than integrity, and I became a footnote in your story." She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. "You didn't just betray me," I continued. "You destroyed yourself. You torched every bit of trust, every ounce of respect, every good thing we built, because you thought you were untouchable. You thought love was a backup plan. And now that the real plan crashed, you're running back to the thing you never valued." "It wasn't like that," she said through gritted teeth, her voice catching as tears streamed down her face. "I didn't think it would all fall apart. But it did," I said, stepping past her toward the front door. "And that wasn't my doing. That was all you." I opened the door, letting the cold evening air spill into the house. She looked at me in disbelief, like she hadn't prepared for this version of me, the one who could let go. "Scott, where am I supposed to go?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said. "But you can't stay here." Her mouth quivered, but no words came out. She just stood there, broken and shaking, as I stepped outside and gently closed the door behind me. Through the frosted glass, I could see her silhouette collapse onto the porch, her shoulders shaking as sobs overtook her. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Not joyful, not vindicated, just free. Because walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's the strongest move a person can make. Especially when the person behind you never deserved to follow. The days after Lena's breakdown passed with a strange kind of clarity. I didn't feel triumphant, and I wasn't out celebrating. But I wasn't drowning anymore either. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I spent mornings walking without a destination and afternoons organizing parts of the house I had long ignored, not because I was trying to erase the past, but because I was finally making room for something else. That something else showed up in the form of Carla Jennings, a local business owner introduced to me by Ashley. She ran a small but growing manufacturing company just outside the city, one she'd taken over after divorcing her own high-profile husband. "She needs someone who understands finance and loyalty," Ashley had said. "And you, Scott, need a fresh start with someone who'll see your value the moment you walk through the door." I didn't expect much from the interview, maybe a bookkeeping role or some part-time help with payroll, but Carla sat across from me in a sunlit office, looked at my resume, then looked me in the eyes and said, "I don't want someone who used to punch numbers for a big company. I want someone who knows how to rebuild when everything's fallen apart." I started the following Monday. At first, our conversations were all business, quarterly projections, vendor disputes, strategies for streamlining operations, but over time, they started to shift. She'd bring me coffee in the mornings. I'd stay late to help her finalize budgets. We began sharing stories, not just about work, but about the people we used to be before life hit us sideways. There were no grand gestures, no fast sparks. Just a quiet connection that grew like ivy, slow but steady. Respect came first, then laughter, then something else that neither of us needed to name just yet. We weren't rushing. We'd both learned what rushing could cost. In her, I saw someone who knew how to fight without manipulation, how to lead without stepping on the people beside her. And in me, she saw more than a man with scars. She saw someone ready to live again. Not as someone's shadow, but as himself. The more time I spent away from the wreckage Lena left behind, the more I began to see the truth I'd been too blinded to face for years. Sometimes the deepest betrayal is what finally wakes you up. I used to think strength meant holding on, enduring, staying loyal no matter what. But real strength? It's knowing when enough is enough. It's having the courage to stop begging for love that's already been sold to the highest bidder. I thought I'd feel hollow without her, but I didn't. I felt still. Grounded. Free from the emotional debt I'd been paying for a long time without realizing it. Every day that passed without the weight of her cold silences or backhanded remarks felt like breathing clean air again. I started waking up early not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'd take my coffee outside, feel the morning sun hit my face, and remind myself that this quiet, this peace, was earned. Carla noticed the shift too. "You've got a different energy about you lately," she said one afternoon, as we wrapped up a meeting. Not lighter, but clearer. She was right. I wasn't carrying the same confusion or need for validation anymore. I had rebuilt more than just my finances or career, I had rebuilt my sense of self. I spent time reading again, caught up with old friends I had unintentionally pushed away, and even took a weekend trip to the mountains just to be alone with my thoughts. There was no performance, no pressure to smile for anyone. Just me, finally listening to my own voice. And that voice told me I was more than the man Lena discarded. I was more than her plan B. I had value long before she stopped seeing it, and now I was starting to see it for myself. It wasn't revenge that healed me. It wasn't watching her fall. It was realizing I never needed her approval to begin with. And that I didn't lose a future when she left, I just made space for a better one. One built on truth, peace, and people who actually wanted to stay. It had been nearly 6 months since I'd last seen her. Life had settled into something steady, work was fulfilling, my evenings were peaceful, and even the silence in the house felt more like space to breathe rather than space to fill. I didn't think much about Lena anymore, not because I was trying to forget her, but because she no longer occupied the parts of me that once begged for her attention. But one Saturday afternoon, while running errands at a grocery store just a few neighborhoods over, I found myself face to face with a ghost. I was standing in the checkout line, loading items onto the conveyor belt, when I looked up and froze. There she was, Lena. Behind the register, hair tied back in a sloppy bun, uniform vest too big on her thin frame, eyes dull and distant. For a moment, she didn't see me. She was scanning cans, mechanically repeating the same line to the woman in front of me. "Did you find everything you needed today?" Her voice was flat, lifeless. When our eyes finally met, it hit her like a truck. Her hand paused mid-scan. Her lips parted slightly, and the color drained from her face. "Scott," she whispered, barely audible. I didn't say a word. I just offered the faintest nod, not out of cruelty, but because there was simply nothing left to say. The woman ahead of me grabbed her bags and left quickly, sensing the shift in energy. Lena's hands trembled as she reached for the next item in my basket, a carton of strawberries, but it slipped and rolled onto the floor. She muttered something, bent down to pick it up, then stood frozen. The next second exploded without warning. She hurled the strawberries at me. "You think you're better than me?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "You smug bastard." She grabbed a handful of oranges from the display behind her and threw one, missing wildly. By now, heads were turning across the store, phones coming out, whispers rising. A manager rushed over, face pale with shock. "Lena, that's enough," he said, trying to calm her. But she wasn't hearing anything. She was unraveling in real time, a woman who had spent her whole life climbing now falling in full view of strangers and fluorescent lights. "Get him out of here," she screamed, pointing at me like I was the problem. The manager shook his head solemnly. "No, Lena. You need to leave. Now." She froze again. And just like that, it was over. She was escorted out the same way she had been from her office months before, quietly, quickly, without dignity. I didn't feel joy watching it happen. Just a sharp, sad certainty. Some people fall not because they were pushed, but because they believe they were too high to ever hit the ground. Walking out of that store, I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood the difference between letting go and giving up. There was nothing left to salvage, nothing worth picking through in the wreckage of what once was. And maybe that's why I'm sharing this now. Not for sympathy. Not for applause. But because I know I'm not the only one who's ever stood at that kind of crossroads, when someone you trusted, someone you gave everything to, turns around and trades your love for status, for validation, for power. So let me ask you something, honestly, from one person to another: if someone you loved betrayed you, not in a moment of weakness, but in pursuit of something they valued more than you, would you forgive them? Or would you walk away to protect your peace? Could you look them in the eyes again and pretend things could ever be the same? Or would you have the strength to close the door and finally choose yourself? Because that's what this story is really about. Not just infidelity, not just deception, but the quiet power in reclaiming your worth after someone tries to bury it. I'm not here to tell you what the right answer is. Everyone's story is different. Everyone's breaking point is personal. But I do want to hear yours. If you've ever faced betrayal, whether in love, friendship, or family, drop your story in the comments. You never know who might need to read it today. Maybe your truth will be the thing that helps someone else find their own. And if you're still in the middle of it, still wondering whether to stay or go, I'll tell you this: sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the only thing keeping you from losing everything else that still matters. Not long ago, I thought loyalty was the highest virtue. I believed that if you loved someone hard enough, long enough, and faithfully enough, they'd never turn their back on you. But life has a brutal way of teaching us that love, when handed to the wrong person, can become a weapon, one they'll use without hesitation if it serves their agenda. That's exactly what Lena did. She didn't just betray me, she used my loyalty as leverage, my silence as a stepping stone, and my love as a shield to hide behind while she chased status. And when everything fell apart, she didn't mourn the relationship. She mourned her fall from the ladder. But here's the truth no one tells you: when someone weaponizes your loyalty, they forfeit the right to your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't automatic. It's sacred. It's earned through remorse, not convenience. And once you see the truth, once the blinders fall and you realize you are holding up a relationship by yourself, it's not your job to rebuild what they burned. You may lose them, yes. You may lose the memories, the plans, the dreams you built around them. But you might just find something far more valuable in the ashes: yourself. The version of you that remembers who you were before they made you feel small. The version that doesn't beg to be chosen. The one who knows his worth, quietly, fiercely, and without apology. That's what I found. Not a new relationship, not a clean slate, but me. And once you find that version of yourself again, you'll never trade him for anyone's approval ever again. So if you're standing at the edge, questioning whether to hold on or finally let go, remember this: the most powerful thing you can ever recover isn't revenge. It's your peace. Your dignity. Your voice. And once you take that back, no one, not even the person who broke you, can take it from you again.